Hey everyone, welcome to Singularity Beast II, Build Log Part 9. Now I know a lot of you guys have been impatiently waiting for this one, and I apologise for the delays. I've had a lot of other systems to build lately. I've actually had 3 client builds in total. You've seen one of the build logs up on my channel so far, well actually half of it, and I've still got to finish the other half of that one, and then I've got 2 more client builds coming up after that, so there's a lot going on at the moment. In this video, I haven't been able to fit the installation of all of the final hardware. So basically I just start installing, well first of all I show you all of the hardware, talk about it, and give you a good close look at it. Then I start the installation of the dust filters, and that's about as far as I get for part 9. Because there's actually still a few bits and pieces that I need to order to finish off. There was a couple of little problems that I ran into that you'll see in this part of the build log. Also, I have actually decided to delay the installation of the motherboard water block. But I'll be doing everything else to finish off the build. The installation of the fan controllers, dust filters, and finishing the cable management and also the lighting. The motherboard water block, I've decided to leave it because I have so much going on at the moment, and you know, it's a big job. I need to basically completely pull this system to bits again, drain the loop, and you know, I've only just finished it. I've only just filled the loop and got this thing up and running, so yeah, I don't want to go pulling it apart already. So couple of weeks once all these client builds are done, and then I'll be installing the motherboard water block. But in the meantime, there's still plenty more to show you in this build log. I still have all the performance and temperature results to go through and the overclocking. Anyway, now I'm going to give you a close look at all of the final hardware. Okay, first up, a close look at the kit of Corsair Dominator GT memory. That will be replacing the G-Skill kit of memory that I've had running in the build. So if you remember, I've mentioned previously in the build log how I had to buy this kit of G-Skill memory temporarily until I could get my hands on some Corsair Dominator GT memory. And yeah, this is the kit that I was after because I wanted a 16 gig kit, and you know, if it was any faster than 2000 megahertz, I know that I'm probably going to have trouble running it at that speed because of the CPU. It will potentially limit the memory running, you know, above 2000 megahertz. So I've got a kit of 2133 because yeah, I might just be able to push it to 2133. I'm certainly hoping that the CPU will allow that. So just a close-up look at one of the modules. So yeah, it runs at 2133. It's a 16 gig kit of quad channel DDR3, and you can see the model number just there. I'm not sure if I'll be water cooling this memory or not yet. So it runs at 91110 27 1.5 volts. I've actually got the water blocks for this memory, but I'm just going to see once I get the motherboard water block installed, I'll see how it looks. It might just be too cramped to run memory water blocks up there, because if you can imagine, I'll show you the motherboard water block shortly, but it's split into 2 parts. There's one water block that goes basically under the end of the graphics cards just there, and that cools the X79 chipset. And the other part of the water block goes on the MOSFETs, which are just there above the CPU. So with those 2 water blocks, with the CPU water block and the graphics card water blocks, that's going to be reasonably cramped. And adding 2 more water blocks to the memory, you know, the memory being on either side of the CPU, is just going to cramp things even more, and it will just look too busy, I think. And you know, the other thing is that memory water blocks are pointless. Mainly if I'm going to be running the memory at stock clocks, which, you know, I don't think the CPU is going to allow for anything more than stock clocks, as I've mentioned. So the memory is not going to be getting hot. I mean, if they were necessary, then I'd certainly install the memory water blocks. There's no doubt about that. If I needed them to get the performance that I want, then I would install them. But yeah, because they're pretty much pointless, I'm considering not installing them. So here I have a bunch of EK water blocks. They're all nickel plexi water blocks. I have 2 EK RAM Dominator ×4 blocks. So yeah, these are for, so you can see there, nickel plexi. These are for 4 modules, and it's the new EN nickel plating. So yeah, 2 of those, which I'll give you a look at shortly, and also the water block for the Rampage 4 Extreme. So you can see which model that is there. So I'll be pulling all those out of the boxes shortly. Here I have an extension cable. Now this is for the extra power to the PCI Express slots. So on the Rampage 4 Extreme, there's a 6-pin PCI Express power plug, which you can see just there. And as I mentioned previously in the build log, I needed a longer extension cable to run to that. So that's what that is for. I also have a whole bunch of other extension cables over here. This is just a Molex to floppy connector. And I think it's 24 inches, which, oh, actually no, it's 16 inches, which is the same length as the 6-pin PCIe power cable that I'm running to the motherboard, because this also needs to go to the motherboard for extra power to the DIMMs. And it actually plugs in right next to the 6-pin just there. You can see it there. So yeah, the reason why I got these 2 extension cables was because the ones that I have aren't long enough, and you can see the plugs up there. I've actually already spoken about all of this previously in the build log, so most of you should know what this is about. But anyway, I actually got 2 of them there. I only need 1. I just got a spare. So that's the extension cables. This is all LEDs, and they're 2-pin red 3mm LEDs. And this is for, okay, I'll be running red LEDs in the pump top, probably the motherboard water block, but I'm not sure if it has LED holes. I'll be running them in the EK Supreme HF CPU water block, and also in the reservoir, and potentially a few other places as well. So I've got a whole bunch of LEDs there. And here I have some 2-pin extension cables, just in case the LED cables are not long enough, because I think these are only 30 centimeters. So I've got some 16-inch and 24-inch 2-pin extension cables. And here I have a Bits Power LED station. Well, it's a Bits Power X Station LED power hub, to be precise. And I'll pull this out of the box shortly, but basically this is going to be running all of my LEDs, and it's going to be connected to one of these Vandal switches up here, while the other one is going to be connected to the rest of the lighting that I still have to install into the system. Next up, the new dust filters that I'm going to be installing into the system. So I had a lot of comments, people saying that they didn't like the way these DEMCI dust filters look on this case, and I absolutely agree. They really take away from the aesthetics of this case. But anyway, I've mentioned previously that I was going to be replacing them, and the good thing is with this case you can actually hide every single dust filter, because the front panel and the top panel can be removed, and you can hide the dust filters underneath them, and the rest of them will be actually underneath the build. Now I know these dust filters are ugly, but as I said, you won't be seeing them because they're hidden. So these are Phobia 120mm black dust filters, and not only do they, you know, protect the fans from fingers going into them. They also have their two-piece, and they have foam, and foam is really good for picking up all of the dust. It's reasonably fine, but because of how thick it is, yeah, it really catches a lot of the dust successfully. So basically that part screws on first, and then that part clips on top of it with the foam in between. So I'm hoping that those are going to fit on nicely. They might be, you know, they might not go right next to each other. That is the potential problem, but I do have plenty of other builds that I can use these in. Now these are the M3 nuts that I've been waiting on so that I can bolt all my case fans on properly. I've already mentioned that previously in the build log. So I already had the bolts, I just had to get the nuts, and I'll be showing you the bolts shortly. They're actually Phobia black nickel bolts. They look very nice. They're Allen key head bolts. Okay, so that's what the LED station looks like. So it's powered by a 4-pin Molex, and I think it's 10 LEDs per row, and there's 4 rows. So 40 LEDs, half is LED only, half is LED with resistor, and it has a clear base. Not sure whether it's acrylic or plexi. And it says UV, and usually these X stations have little LEDs on them to light them up, and you can get all different coloured ones, but I can't see the LEDs on this. Maybe they're actually underneath the PCB or something. Okay, here I have some G-Vans FC6 fan controllers. Now these are exactly the same as the Lambtron FC6, and up here I have a Lambtron FC5. So they're basically just been rebadged. Now look at the boxes. They are definitely the G-Vans FC6, both of them are. Now take a look at the fan controllers. You can see they're two different fan controllers. They're very similar, but the faceplates are different. And the faceplate is the exact reason that I chose the FC6. And this is the FC6 faceplate. I know that for sure because that's the reason I chose it, because it has these bolt heads, and the brushed aluminium surface is much more apparent. It matches up better with my Vandal switch panel, which is precisely the reason I got the FC6. As you can see, the Allen key bolt heads on the Vandal switch panel, and the brushed aluminium surface is, you know, pretty strong on the Vandal switch panel, so that's why I got it. You can see that I mean, this is just really picky and small. So what's happened here? This is the FC6, this is the FC5, and FC5 has been put into the FC6 packaging, and it's sealed, which means it's come like that from the manufacturer. What I'm going to do is I'm going to keep these two for other builds, because, you know, I'm using fan controllers all the time in client builds, and I'm just going to get myself another Lambtron FC5, which I can get from my supplier within Australia, and I can get it sent up here overnight. So there we go. That sums up the fan controllers. I was just about to install them as well. Okay, next up, the water blocks. So this is the EK water block for the Rampage 4 Extreme, and it's the nickel plexi version. So you can see it comes in 2 parts. This part is for the X79 chipset, and the other part is for the MOSFETs. And EK is definitely my favorite company for water blocks. I mean, just look at these water blocks. They are just perfect in every way. I love the design. The quality of the materials and the construction is always very apparent with EK's products. I highly recommend them. You can see it's a high flow design as well. You're not going to get any flow restriction out of that, or very little. Nice and shiny underneath. And this is the new EN nickel plating, so it's not quite as shiny as the old nickel plating that they used to use. It's got a little bit more of a matte finish to it, but God, that is one nice water block. I am very impressed with that, and I love this new design that they have. as well. Their water blocks used to be just pretty much, you know, blank and simple, but now they're starting to put these cuts in the surface, which looks really nice. So just looking at the MOSFET water block now. Very little flow restriction out of that one also. And always excellent performance out of EK's water blocks. These are going to look amazing in the build, mainly if I can put some LEDs in them. I'm not sure if there's any holes drilled, but there you go. So here's the memory water block, and obviously I'll be needing to run two of these, one on either side of the CPU. And this is another amazing looking water block. Just a masterpiece, really. You can see there is LED holes drilled into this water block. I could just look at these things all day. Nice EK logo there in the middle. Once they've got some coolant running through them and LEDs in place, they look even better. Just look at the bottom. So these just bolt straight on top of Corsair Dominator memory in place of the heat sinks that are already there. So basically you just undo the bolts off the top of your Corsair Dominator memory, and yeah, you can actually use the exact same bolts to bolt this water block on. So you can see the red parts of the memory is the only part that needs to come off for this water block to go on. And yeah, you can see the little black Allen key bolt heads there, and they're the ones you use to screw on the water block. So there you go. That's all of the hardware that I need to show you. That's the final hardware that's going into the system. Now I'm going to start the installation. Okay, the dust filters didn't fit. Not such a disappointment for me, because I wasn't actually that happy with them anyway. You know, I think they were a little bit, you know, on the ugly side for this build, and they, you know, it would have been good to have had a two-piece dust filter that I could pull apart and clean. That's what I was after. But what I've taken the opportunity to go ahead and install all of these nice black Allen key bolts instead of the other screws that were in there, so that matches up with the case a lot better. And I just still have to do these. I left these in to show you what I was using before. These are nice stainless steel screws, but yeah, I prefer the black ones that match up with the case, and they're also flatter. They're button heads, so all good. And yeah, what I'm going to do with the top now in the way of dust filters is just not install any, because there's plenty of air blowing out the top of the case. That's going to keep the dust away while the system is on, and when the system is off, I'll just cover it up. Problem solved. So what I've decided to do now for the front of the case and also underneath the case, well, actually underneath the case is already sorted. If you remember, I'm using the Silverstone 120mm dust filters underneath the case, so I'm just going to put them everywhere else. Okay, just to look underneath the case where I already had the Silverstone 120mm dust filters installed, I actually removed all of these and reinstalled them using the same Allen key button head bolts that I used on the top of the case. So you can see those bolts there, and these filters were absolutely just caked with dust already, only after 1 month of running the system. So yeah, they're doing a good job. The reason that I used the Silverstone 120mm dust filters down there on the bottom of the case to begin with was because I was concerned that the other dust filters that I was using, the DMCI magnetic dust filters, weren't going to stay on the bottom of the case because of gravity. You know, they're hanging off the bottom of the case. I was concerned they weren't going to stick. So I bolted the Silverstone 120mm dust filters on down there, and the reason that I didn't use those across the whole case to start with was because I didn't think that the mesh was fine enough to, you know, catch enough dust. But after all the trouble that I've been through, I've realised that, you know, they are really the only option. Now I have the front panel off the case, and I'm just starting to install the Silverstone dust filters on the front of the case. You can see I've got two of them there on the right hand side. Those are the only two that I can install for now. The reason for that is you can see I've got these fans mounted on with the rubber mounts, and that's all I could do until I got the bolts, nuts and bolts that I needed. What I'm going to do now is use these bolts here. These are nice black nickel Phobia Allen key bolts. They're M3s. I'm going to put an M3 nut on the other side, and I'll just put a washer on either side, and then I'll be able to bolt the dust filters on at the same time as I do that. So that goes for the bottom fan there and the top fan just there. These two, all I did was replace, these are the stock screws that come with the case for mounting the hard drive cages and also for a whole bunch of other things. So that's just a thumb screw, and I just replaced them with these screws. They're just a flathead, and it's got the same thread, but the thread doesn't start until, you know, a long way down, which doesn't actually matter anyway. These are actually from a Fractal Define R3 for mounting the hard drives, I'm pretty sure, but they work perfectly for this. And you know, there's even plenty of thread to tighten these up even more if I want to. Okay, I've got the front panel of the case back on now, and I just wanted to give you a quick look at what these Silverstone dust filters are going to look like through the front panel. So you can just see the Silverstone dust filter there through the front panel mesh, and yeah, it looks great. You know, it's almost completely hidden. It matches up with the case perfectly, and you know, they do an excellent job of catching the dust. So I'm really happy with the way these look. So there we go. Now I just have to order some more of these in, because I've actually run out, and that's the reason that I can't continue installing the rest of them in this video. I need to get about another 7 of those, I think, because I'm going to be installing a couple of fans onto the bottom of the case on this side underneath the power supplies as well. That's something else that I'm doing. So this panel, I forgot to mention, to install the dust filters on this side, it's also very easy. I just need to pull this panel out, and it actually comes apart. Then I just put, you know, bolt the fans on the same way as I'm going to bolt these fans on with the M3 bolts, and yeah, bolt the filters on, and that's it. Okay, that sums up part 9 of the build log. Part 10 will be following directly on from part 9. I'll be finishing the installation of the dust filters, installing the fan controller, the other fan controller. I'll be then doing the rest of the cable management and the lighting. And as I've mentioned, I'll be leaving the installation of the motherboard water block for another couple of weeks now, until I've got through the whole lot of client builds that I'm doing at the moment. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, like and favourite if you want to see more. Thanks everyone.